It was a day of looking at nature. Katie found out that some flowers bloom in the springtime, then sleep until next year. Orbie learned that when you plant a brand new flower, you have to be very gentle. And they both discovered that you can tell when summer is getting closer because the sun makes you feel like taking your sweater off. One of Katie and Orbie's favorite things to do in the summer was to go down to the pond and feed the ducks. When they finished helping Mom in the garden, she suggested that they should all go and see if the ducks were hungry. She made up a special bag full of all kinds of good things for ducks to eat. And Katie and Orbie were very happy to be helping the ducks. In rubber boots and with food bags, the three of them set off. Things were quiet at the pond as they walked down the path. Katie was afraid that the ducks weren't there. But when they came around the corner of the winding path, the pond was full of them. And when the ducks saw their two old friends, they swam to the edge of the pond. Three even quacked. Katie and Orbie waved and giggled. Mom sat on her favorite bench and helped Katie open up the bag. Katie was so excited and kept looking back over her shoulder to make sure that the ducks didn't swim away. But they knew their friends were bringing treats, and they waited. Orbie burbled, "Lunch would only be a minute." Mom gave Katie the bag. When Katie ran over with the bag, the ducks swam away. Then they turned and watched as she and Orbie threw hands full of duck treats out onto the pond. As soon as the ducks saw the food landing on the pond surface, they swam over and plucked it up. Some raced for the same piece and were surprised when their friend got to it before they did. Soon, a couple of pigeons gathered at Orbie's feet. They nibbled at the crumbs that were falling out of his hands as he threw his duck treats. Then a few more pigeons seemed to figure out that there was a good food falling. And they came over, and a few more, and a few more, and soon there was no room on the ground. Katie giggled beside Orbie. As they got ready to throw another handful of duck treats out over the pond, a flurry of pigeons landed on his arm and his head. And soon he was a pink pile of pigeons. Mom and Katie giggled as they helped Orbie send the birds on their way. It was about that moment that Orbie heard an interesting sound. It wasn't a sound made by the pigeons, and it wasn't a sound made by the ducks. Orbie looked around. It sounded like it was made by a huge, big, fat thing. Maybe a hippopotamus? Mom told Orbie the creature was smaller than that. It certainly wasn't a hippo. They only lived in really hot countries. Orbie asked, "Was it a great big hog?" Mom chuckled and she shook her head. "Maybe," he burbled. "It was a huge flying rhinoceros." Mom and Katie looked at Orbie. He shrugged his shoulders. He made that up, and he laughed. Katie and Orbie looked in the bushes and across the lake. Where was that big, fat sound coming from? Mom giggled and told them that they were looking up when they should be looking down. The sound, which was low and heavy like a big bong, didn't sound like it was coming from something small on the ground. Katie and Orbie looked around but still couldn't find where it was coming from. I have to say, they were puzzled. Mom came over and told them that it was fine to look and walk in the shallow water at the pond's edge. Their rubber boots would keep their feet dry. Now both Katie and Orbie were confused. The things that lived in water were fish. Did fish make big, huge sounds? Well, I have to tell you that it wasn't a fish. As Orbie bent over and inspected the water, two eyes bulged up at him. Then the bug-eyed creature made a huge balloon happen under his chin, and the sound came out. Orbie could see through the water that it was a frog. He called Katy over. Mom told him he needed to be quiet or he'd scare the frog. But the funny creature just looked at Orbie with great interest, then hopped up on a lily pad. He didn't even notice Katy. Mom told Orbie that frogs eat bugs, and perhaps Orbie looked like the biggest, tastiest pink bug in the world. Orbie chuckled. The frog made a big balloon again, and out came the sound. It echoed all around the pond. Orbie loved it. He made a big balloon, too, at the end of his nose, and made the strange, low sound back to the frog. And I have to tell you, no one was more surprised than the frog. He leapt off his lily pad and dived into the water. Then he popped his head right up and looked at Orbie again. Orbie made another sound. And the frog hopped back up on the lily pad. I think he was getting to like Orbie. The frog made another sound. It was a little different than the first, and Orbie copied him. And with the frog sitting on the lily pad, Orbie standing in the shallow water, they sang a froggy song. Katy and Mom giggled. Then Katy noticed an interesting thing. Orbie and the frog were not alone. When they made a sound, another frog across the pond joined in. Then another and another. Mom sat at the edge of the pond and enjoyed the serenade. Katy pretended to conduct them. They had a lot of fun, and when it was time to go, Katy and Orbie said and croaked goodnight to the frog and the ducks. Nobody answered. But as they went up the path, they heard a great big croak that resounded over the pond. Katy was pretty sure the frog was saying goodnight to them. And I think that she was right. And I hope that if you are ever at a pond, that you'll get to play with bullfrogs, just like Katy and Orbie did. I know that the frogs would love to play with you.
Did you know? Did you know? Trees don't have mouths, but they drink water all the time. The root is the part that grows down into the ground. It holds the tree in the soil and finds the water it needs. I bet you'll find it tastes better from the tap.